ransomware from start to finish in 5 hours.
Hey Manish, what's the story you have for us today?
This is a really actually crazy story. It's about an organization. They don't say which organization, but it's the Ryuk gang targeted an organization and basically encrypted the entire network in 5 hours from start to finish. Like that is, that just really ups the game for all incident responders and network defenders out there. And it was, using vulnerabilities that exist out there and bringing it all together to do this in under 5 hours is just crazy. So the campaign starts out with, a typical phish email that goes out, and in this case, it was a non-privileged domain user that received the phish email and clicked on it, and then from there, from the phish email, a successful installation of the Bazaar loader, which then allowed the attackers to start getting in there, and then from once they got in there, there start basic mapping of the network that they were able to do using just the built-in utilities like NLTest. But to move further, obviously they need to escalate privileges, right? And in this case, they use a Zerologon vulnerability. If you're not familiar with that, that's, I think back in August, Microsoft released a couple of patches for it, and, the awareness was out there for that. So I guess what that does is that vulnerability, it's a flaw in the logon process. I guess where the initialization vector is set to all zeros all the time, instead of a random number. And that's how, it's supposed to be a random number, but I guess because it's all zeros, it's easy for an attacker to exploit. And that's actually a 10 out of 10 severity vulnerability. There's known proof of concepts exploits out there. So the other issue is that, the patches, and I believe there's 2 of them, they have to be applied to all of the domain controllers in the environment. So, using that vulnerability, once the attackers were able to escalate their privileges, and, they elevate to admin privileges, they reset the machine password for the primary domain controller. Once they do that, then they move laterally to the second domain controller, and they continue to map out the network as they're going along. And they're using just the built-in tools like the net command and the PowerShell AD module, things like that. So then, from the secondary domain controller, they RDP back to the primary using the built-in admin account. And from there, they deploy something that we've been hearing a lot about lately is Cobalt Strike. And, they use the trial version of Cobalt Strike to, continue moving further laterally throughout the network. As they're moving laterally, they're, conducting recon on the network itself, mapping it out. And, at the end of it, they're able to deploy the malware to the backup servers, any other servers they find in the environment, the workstations, and then finally, at the end of it, they deploy the malware onto the primary domain controller, and everything is now encrypted. And all, at the 5 hour mark from start to finish, as I said earlier. And that's just, that's crazy. It really forces everyone out there to now not only, make sure that they're patched, those critical flaws are being patched as soon as possible, but also to be extremely quick in their response and detection of things that could be, that level of targeting your domain controllers. And then the Zerologon privilege escalation bug, that also adds a huge vulnerability that allows them to go from a non-privileged domain user all the way to having access to the primary domain controller and secondary domain controllers. I mean, it's pretty serious in such a short amount of time.
What's really interesting is that vulnerability has been out and well known, and patches available for several weeks now.
Right.
Several weeks, and that is still being found in that environment, right? And we're still doing penetration tests, for example, and finding MS-1710 out in environments, bugs that have been around for years, and that's not an exception, which is the really horrible thing, right? I mean, people wonder, like, why are we getting hacked? And it's like, well, because you didn't patch the problem. You can't do enough to stay on top of patches if you want to get the most bang for your security buck, man. Just get them taken care of.
I also feel like this story we heard several times this year. This is very same story. I guess the amazing thing here is the adversaries are so good at it now that they're down to just 5 hours flat, compromising a network. But the story of ransomware, it since at least the stay-at-home orders, I've noticed, is just a constant thing. It's, you hear about ransomware like every week, and it's probably, similar gangs or similar people, but they have a methodology.
Right.
Before, when you got ransomware, you clicked on it and it only impacted your computer. But it's a real business now, and the adversaries, they're paying attention to you specifically. So that malware infection is now translating into them, coming into your network, looking around for vulnerabilities and spreading laterally. That used to be reserved for APT only. But now, it's almost any crimeware gang out there looking to make a buck is going in there and, compromising your whole infrastructure to basically leave you powerless. So you do have to pay the ransom. It's very scary, actually. Sometimes it makes me scared to use the internet on my own computer. Even though, like Mike said, all you got to do, you got to patch, you gotta have your layered defenses so you don't fall victim to something like this. But I think the level of sophistication for even like simple crimeware now is at the next level. So all defenders in every company, if you run any kind of business and you have IT in any kind of way, that it doesn't matter if you're using Windows or something else, you have to really pay attention to what your assets are and what is your plan for these different things that can happen, ransomware, or what is your plan for responding to an event like this, your backup strategy, your detections. Like everyone has to have become now like their own, you have to have like almost like a stock and things like that.
Right.
So it's a very, very important reminder. This 5-hour mark is a very, very important reminder to everyone. And the adversaries aren't just doing it by, getting you to download something. They're also doing drive-by exploits of open architecture, open services you have out there, things like that, websites with vulnerabilities. So they're really after everyone all of the time. So if you have any kind of IT infrastructure out there, you just have to think, how am I protecting it? If you don't know how you're protecting it, you might be in trouble.
Yeah, and like you said, the ransomware, it's a big business. Because if you think about it, just a short time ago, when we first started talking about ransomware, it was all make sure you back up. You're doing regular backups, right? But as I'm assuming what's happened is because everyone was forcing everyone had the strategy of making sure they had backups in place and things like that. Well, they got the attackers got smarter too. So now they're not only going after your primary servers, they're also going after your backup servers. So as we change, they're also adjusting their tactics to keep getting around us. And that's, that to me points to how lucrative this business is.
It's also an interesting example that translates across disciplines, right? Everybody wants to follow best practices. Doesn't matter if you're defending an IT network or you're attacking an IT network or whatever else, right? If someone finds a better mousetrap, they're going to use it. And so this is one of these kind of Darwinian kind of things where if as a network administrator, if as an organization, you're not making investments to keep up with best practices, you're falling behind because you're staying still, but the rest of the environment, the rest of your, enterprises out there are making investments. They're raising the bar. The attackers are finding new and better ways to, circumvent those increases, so they're raising their bar. They're all evolving their capabilities for better or worse, whatever their intent. And if you're like, no, I'm fine, I'm just going to stay right here, that now you're just an even easier target for, the enhanced game of the cyber criminals that have cut their teeth, going after large scale enterprises. And now they look at the mid-market or down market and it's just, game on, right? It's just easy pickings at that point.
I think there's plenty of targets out for these, gangs like this. So I think, we all have to make sure that we're, doing what we can to identify and patch and, even like researching these vulnerabilities, because, there's only so much time and you have to put your efforts and focus on the things that are the most critical for you, whether it's, patching your domain controllers because of a specific vulnerability that allows lateral movement and remote code execution and what have you, right? So it's all, it all comes together, and it's obviously very difficult for a lot of organizations, which is why a lot of these attackers are so successful, which is unfortunate. But in this article, it's really interesting, and like Stan mentioned earlier, this is all APT. 5 years ago, this is the tactics that you would reserve for APT, but now this is for things that everyone has to now look out for. And there's a lot to research and make sure you're protected against in this article. And it's really interesting, and I really recommend putting some effort into making sure you're protected against this type of attack.